Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this Microsoft Copilot webinar, how you can use it in your organization. This webinar is brought to you today in partnership with Microsoft from technology services and solutions provider Tiva and Microsoft technology distributor Ingram. Hello, I'm Adam. I am the head of client engagement here at Tiva and the strategic lead for AI solutions. And I'm joined by Pete Graham from Ingram, who is a Microsoft 365 specialist. So we've got the Q&A function live. So as questions come to mind, if you could just pop it in the chat, we're going to leave some time at the end of the session to run through all the questions and answers in one, if that's okay. So I'll hand over to you, Pete. You're going to run through the content, and the floor is yours.
Great, thanks, Adam. Hi, everyone. So, yeah, it's hopefully not going to be death by PowerPoint today, but you do have the ability to kind of switch through some of the slides and see what's ahead and what's coming. But as Adam said, if you do have any questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat. We will be answering some questions during potentially and all of them at the end. But yeah, without further ado, so we're going to talk about Microsoft 365 Copilot today and how you can use it in your organization. And before we get started, I just want to point out that Microsoft, you know what Microsoft naming conventions is like. It's not very the easiest to understand a lot of the time, but there is around about 22 Copilots in the market today. But everyone is talking about Copilot for Microsoft 365, which is what we're going to talk about. So this is the one that's built into the apps that we know and love every day, as you can see from my colorful background. But there is Copilot for Dynamics, for sales. There's Copilot for Intune. There's Copilot for Windows. If you're using Windows 11 today, you'll see the little Copilot icon in your taskbar at the minute. And there's various other different ones. But let's just take a quick look at how everyone's been using 365 Copilot so far. So last year, Microsoft launched it in a private preview, and these are some of the results from some of the businesses that got their early access to Copilot. And they're quite interesting. So you can see here that 64% of people struggled with finding the time and energy to get their work done. Now, that could be an element of, working from home and hybrid working, that sort of thing, work-life balance, things like that. And just trying to get through the hundreds of emails that you would potentially get every day. And 68% of them said that Copilot improved their quality of work. And that's where you're delegating some of the tasks to Copilot to say, hey, how can I reword this sentence? Or, hey, can you help me, start this presentation or draft up a response to this email, which is quite useful. And 77% of the people that tried it didn't want to give it up again after they'd had their first flavor of it. So it's quite interesting to see some of those poll results from the initial engagement of users that tried it. But with it being, artificial intelligence, we've all seen Terminator and iRobot and all those kind of other savvy films and sci-fi films. And there's always going to be, some challenges around security, compliance, and things like that, and just our general, human nature to be to query a lot of things. And when it comes to artificial intelligence, you're effectively, letting it understand and how you do business and what is in your environment that you save all your data in. And data oversharing is one of the biggest things that happens within an organization. We have all the tools and technology to share and co-author and elaborate on documents live with other people on the other side of the world or in the office while we're working at home. And we typically just share things and don't ever think about it again. But that link forever exists. So as an example, there could be hundreds of documents in your organization that are just generic for anyone to look at. But, the user's been, unknowledgeable to the fact that if that link was given to somebody outside your organization, they could potentially open that document as well. And which is why there's so many data leaks that happen all the time. You've seen the data leak that happened to the PSNI last year, when they were trying to share information and accidentally gave out all the towns and full names of all the police officers in Northern Ireland. It was quite a substantial leak, but that was an accidental user error where they overshared the data inadvertently, not knowing that that link was open to everybody. And then you've got non-compliance usage in terms of we've obviously got the GDPR side of things, but we've also got in terms of whether someone's editing a document that's very highly sensitive, maybe it's payroll, maybe it's HR or something like that. And we don't, sometimes label it as only this certain person can get access to it. And maybe we don't even want artificial intelligence to look at the really highly sensitive information. And we'll talk about that later in the presentation. And Microsoft is fully aware of those concerns. So in terms of how a company will put AI into their business is top of mind. It's one of the biggest challenges that people are or objections that people are thinking about. And the lack of visibility of how AI is using and reading the data or responding to requests that we make, and the lack of protection as well in terms of when you're implementing AI into the workplace, how can you protect your users and mitigate there, you can tell this is live, mitigate the risks of data leakage, where you're asking AI to look at something, but that user may not necessarily have the right permissions to look at that, and AI will not give you that data. But also ensuring that the right people have the right access to the information that you're allowing them to, and we'll talk about that in a bit more detail as we go on. I love this slide. I just want to point out this one here is quite an interesting one. So before we get into the Copilot journey, when it comes to the data risk that we all have within our environments, it's very apparent that there's so many ransomware attacks that are happening at the minute. We've seen the Santander one just a few weeks ago, and EasyJet and British Airways in the past and stuff. We always hear about the big organizations, but can you believe that this is how much is charged to get that data once it's been breached? So some of the really interesting things that I like here is if I just find here, compromised PCs and devices. If you wanted to go and buy some compromised PC and device, serial numbers or accounts and stuff like that, it's as little as 82 cents on the dollar. Ransomware kits. If you wanted to start your career to be, a ransomware threat actor, you can get it for $66. In terms of stolen passwords, if I want 400 million passwords, it's only $150. And this is just how worthless some of this data can be in terms of a cost, but just how cheap it can be to gain access to all that data. And if you didn't know before, there's a great website called Have I Been Pwned, where you can type in your email address to see if your email address is in the dark web, in terms of where people can go and download your email address if it's been part of a data breach of a company or organization in the past. But this is some of the things that we need to be aware of when we're starting to implement AI technologies into the workplace. Now, Microsoft is no stranger to the security and environment. Obviously, they are one of the biggest security partners in the world right now. Whether you knew that or it's something you can use for your next pub quiz, but Microsoft is bringing together the best-in-class security, sensitive data protection, and how to govern your Copilot usage in terms of AI. They have an AI story, an AI journey, which we'll talk about in a second. But I just want to point out that depending on the license that you've got, you will have the tools to restrict, certain files and permissions to what Copilot can see. You'll be able to control the document sharing on a granular level, either on a document level or a SharePoint site level. And in terms of the applications that read data within your organization, it can respond back to you and tell you that this application that you downloaded from the Windows Store or from the private browser is starting to look at data that you may or may not know about. And then we can also label, when users are sharing stuff externally, you can have a pop-up box that says, are you sure you want to send this because it contains this, this, and this? And you can also track the audit of what people have changed in a document before they're, sent it. And you can even use AI to go back and see what AI has changed. So if you've asked it to change a document, and you've saved it and you've forgotten, well, what did what did Copilot change in this document after I made it? You can go back through your own audit history on a user level to see, oh, Copilot suggested this and it changed this paragraph to this paragraph. It added 2 additional lines or words or something. So you can go back and create a way that you can govern what exactly is Copilot changing that we ask it to, and what can we allow it to support our day-to-day productivity of. Okay. Now, when it comes down to AI security and the principles around it, Microsoft has these core foundations to protect everyone. So they've got fairness, reliability and safety, privacy and security, inclusiveness, transparency, and accountability. So in terms of the reliability and safety, making sure that AI is going to be reliable in terms of the data that it collects, and it's safe to use in terms of the responses that it gives as well, but also the fairness in terms of it will always tell you where it's getting the information on, and it will not ever include biasness. Um, when it comes to inclusiveness, ensuring that it's not going to give other people different data in terms of the same request that they do, depending on how they are as a person. And when it comes down to the transparency, obviously being transparent with how it came to the conclusion that it did come to. And my favorite one, which I've talked about before, is accountability, where Microsoft says the accountability of whoever creates these AI models is accountable for ensuring that it meets all these laws. But the funniest thing, and just to be completely transparent with you guys, is that you cannot hold Microsoft responsible for the responses that Copilot gives, because it is generative AI, which I think is brilliant as well. But obviously, we're digressing here. So Microsoft 365 Copilot, what is it? It is a large language model. It allows it to understand mass amounts of data, to effectively elevate and describe in detail a response to a question that you give it. So when it comes to AI, obviously, if you go back to Alan Turing and the Turing test, if you remember that film with Benedict Cumberbatch, that was one of the first artificial intelligence models ever created. And to this day, we're even using AI. Sometimes some people are beknown to the fact that predictive text is generated by AI. Shuffling music and giving recommendations is all generated by AI. But now we're starting to come into that kind of digital transformation journey where we're using it more and more, and we're trying to pull it into more processes in our day-to-day work life. Now, the interesting thing about Microsoft 365 Copilot, which differentiates it from any other AI that you can go and have a look and play around with today, whether that be Gemini from Google or ChatGPT, is in terms of the enterprise-grade protection and the web and graph grounding. Microsoft 365 Copilot's unique ability to look in your Microsoft 365 tenant and understand who does certain actions on a regular basis. In terms of Sally in accounts always does the monthly sales report in this Excel folder, and it's on a month-by-month basis. It can understand and describe how they come to the conclusion of working on those documents. If somebody asks something very specific, it knows where to get it and how to understand the data, because it's constantly looking through the additional files that are being created and the edits that are being made, and what calendar invites and Teams meetings people are having to bring together all that information into a concise kind of method. As an example, if you ask it to summarize and create a pitch on an engagement you've been having with a client, it will go back through all your Teams meetings and calls with that person's email address and find all the engagement you've ever had and all the questions and answers that they've gave you. And you can say, well, can you make sense of all this, or can you describe this? And it will be able to articulate and consolidate all that information into a format that you choose. When it comes down to the enterprise-grade protection, the data protection around that, it inherits your security policies that you've got set up in your organization today. So whatever policies you've got turned on within your business premium license, your E5 license, your E3 license, that sort of thing, and it will ensure that all the data is protected within your environment's bubble, so to speak. And it's built into the 365 apps that we know and love every day. So you can pull a sidebar along and engage with Copilot, or you can do the backslash icon, kind of like Twitter atting. You can do the backslash icon in a Word document, in a PowerPoint document, and type to Copilot live in a document. So it's integrated into the apps for much more ease of use to help with your productivity, rather than having to open a completely separate window to use another form of artificial intelligence that you may be using. But also it works with Microsoft Teams. Whenever it's recording, it will listen to the language that's being spoken, and it can help translate where possible as well on the fly. And then the final thing, which we'll talk about in a bit more detail later, is Copilot Studio. We've talked heavily about how Microsoft, 365 Copilot can read all the different stuff that's within your environment, but it can actually be plugged in to other software platforms, such as, Salesforce and ServiceNow and other things. And you can create your own copilots to help your users grab data from other areas where you might have stored your data, whether that be in Azure or on premise as well. So the possibilities are endless. Now, when we talk about the data within your organization and how does Copilot get to it, we're going to talk about really quickly here the semantic index and the Microsoft Graph. And this is what makes it quite unique. So the Microsoft Graph, if you're not aware, is your data in your environment. It's all the calendar invites, it's all the files, it's the tasks, it's the devices, the security, everything that tells Microsoft or tells your company what exactly is your company doing and processing every single day. Everything that goes on is stored within the Microsoft Graph. It's sort of like the brain of your environment, which is unique to every domain that you have. The semantic index is the filing system within the brain of your environment. So the semantic index is what allows you to quickly find all the information regarding your company. And so when you create a calendar invite, when you create a document and you save it in the Microsoft Graph or your SharePoint sites, your OneDrive points, even on your desktop, the semantic index is the auditor. It allows the large language models of Copilot to understand and bring together all your data, messages, tasks, groups, communications, chats, calls, so that it can easily articulate these are all relatable to the same story. And that's what makes Copilot very unique in the market that we're in today. Okay. Now, when it comes down to the licenses, obviously Copilot is an add-on to what you've already got now, and we'll talk about that in a bit more detail later. But when it comes down to the licenses, I just want to point out from an SMB perspective, from a company that's under 300 users, you do have a lot of flexibility in terms of the license that you attach Copilot to. But obviously, there's always going to be a good, better, best approach when it comes to that. So the good and better approach, you can see here from an SMB standpoint, is your business basic and your business standard. You have your multi-factor authentication. You can search, and export results from Copilot. You can have retention and deletion policies for Copilot interaction, which is great. And that's kind of like the bare minimum that you can have when it comes to those licenses and what you can do and control within Copilot. But if you want the best experience of Copilot to ensure your data security, privacy, and policies are being adhered to ensure that there's no user that's searching for, using Copilot to search for something that they shouldn't be, and Copilot giving them the information, or ensuring that somebody doesn't overshare something that they shouldn't have access to, it's best to have your comprehensive security controls, which are included in SKUs like Business Premium or Microsoft 365 E3 or E5. Where you can go through the manual sensitivity retention labeling policies, where you can label sensitive documents to say, this document cannot be shared outside the organization, or this document can be only edited or viewed by these individuals within my organization, or this group of people. And then the data loss prevention policies, ensuring that the files and emails are not accidentally shared or deleted or accessed by anyone external to your organization as well. But these are some of the comprehensive controls that you should be aware of that can support your Copilot adoption journey. Now, we've talked a bit there about, what can Copilot do, the art of the possible, the security and compliance side of things, but ideally we don't want to be thinking about that in too much detail. The thing we want to be looking at today is what matters most to your business, and can Copilot solve a business challenge you've got today? Now, looking on the face of it, it absolutely can solve a lot of challenges that businesses are struggling with in this day and market. So things like how can we ensure that Copilot is helping you focus on running your business? Okay, growing your customer base, building your brand, scaling securely. When we think about those kind of in isolation, we talk about how Copilot can help a user be more productive and find answers faster. We're going to talk about how it can articulate a response back to an email or a Teams message to a client. It can help articulate, if you've got dyslexia or something like that, it can, get Copilot to review something you've typed to make sure it makes sense or it comes across as a professional in a professional manner. But it can also help with building your brand, in terms of where people are creating documents to share with customers, but they're not using the company assets, asking Copilot to use the same theme for the company assets template document, and help you scale securely to ensure that if somebody's creating something or accessing information, it's the information that they're actually allowed and they're responsible for, rather than having everyone have access to everything. Because what Copilot can inadvertently do is, if somebody asks for something and that document is not secured properly, it will allow that user to have that information if it's not secured and safely stored. Now, what we'll do is we'll really quickly look into what does the journey of Copilot look like when you initiate a response. Now, some of you today, it would be great if to get a bit of interaction right now to understand, if you want to raise your hand with the icon at the top of the screen, how many of you are using ChatGPT today or other forms of AI? It'd be quite interesting to see the response of hands and to see how you're using it, and just to see how many of you are using that today. So we've got 34, 35, still growing, a few of you still. So it's quite interesting to see that quite a lot of you, almost half of the people here so far are using some form of ChatGPT or artificial intelligence, which is quite interesting because when you're using, not to disparage them, of course, but when you're using those forms of technology, ChatGPT is learning from the information that you're sharing with it, obviously to grow, its understanding of how it can be better. But when you're using Copilot, it's your own instance of information. It helps train the model of your own Copilot instance within your environment. Microsoft doesn't use any of the data that's stored within your tenancy to make Copilot better. It's your own instance of generative AI for every single business that Microsoft is connected to. So, say there's 50 companies on this webinar today. If you all had Copilot, it would be 50 instances of Copilot, and each Copilot is learning from its own business data and not sharing it with Microsoft. So bear that in mind when it comes to using Copilot or using generative AI, in terms of making sure that you're not oversharing data to third-party models and things like that. Now, when it comes to engaging with Copilot, we've got a nice little click-through prompt here that I want to show you. How does Copilot respond to? And maybe if you're using Copilot now, and you're finding maybe it's not it's different to how ChatGPT responds back to you, or you're getting different results. You'll always get different results, but it's quite interesting to see how it comes to its decision and how it gets there in its journey. So it's a 6-step process. So you think of a prompt. You think, right, hey Copilot, I want you to prepare my day. What's in my calendar today? Or can you draft me up, a pitch based on this Word document or something like that? You'll prompt it, and then it will go into your pre-processing stage. You can see here as the arrow goes down to the Microsoft graph. If it's data within your tenancy, it will go straight into the Microsoft graph to find the information that will be relatable to give you a response. If you have web search toggled on, it can sometimes go and search for the web through Bing, or if you've got your plugins with Copilot Studio or your Dataverse or Power Platform services, it can even go check in there as well. But for this instance, say we're just looking at internal business data. It will go into the Microsoft Graph and grab as much detail as possible in terms of any email communications relating to a topic that you've described, any files, chats, meetings that have been had, recordings of that meeting. And then it will throw it all into the large language model, and it will start to understand what exactly was the ask and what data can we and try to make sense of it. We're thinking here of the semantic index and how can it make sense of the information that it's got. Then it goes back to the Microsoft Graph for an additional check to make sure that the data that it's grabbed how it's understood it is exactly the same as the data that it initially captured. All right. So again, it's double checking its work to make sure that it's understood the ask and request, and the data that it's actually collating is relevant to the response it's going to give you. That's quite important. It's relevant to the request. Then it goes into your post-processing stage. This is where it checks within Microsoft Purview and Defender whether you've actually got access to that data and whether you're allowed to have the response, or there's data in there that maybe it's grabbed data from one specific file that you don't have access to, but you have access to all the other files. It will then remove anything that you do not have the extract permissions to access or review. And then finally, it will give you a response back to the user. It's quite a lot of work that goes on in there in the background, but it's important to know that, responses from generative AI can take anywhere from 5 seconds to 30 seconds to 45 seconds, depending on the size of the document that you're asking it to review or look at. Now, that's why it takes so long, because it's going through these initial stages of checking the data internally, understanding it, and making sure that you have direct access to the response that you're allowed to. So that's quite important in terms of where, maybe why it takes slightly longer than the turbo mode of ChatGPT or something like that. But just for your own peace of mind. Again, if you want to take a picture of this slide before I move on, you're more than welcome. But it just gives you a good understanding of what goes on in the background. Right, just going to move slides now. So Copilot Studio. So this is the elevated next stage of your Copilot journey, and I want to talk about this in just a hot topic here. So this is quite important, because if all your data is not stored within Microsoft 365, maybe you got some data stored in a CRM platform like Salesforce or something like that. Or maybe you've got a support service desk and you've got some things stored in ServiceNow or anything else, or you've got some data stored on premise or in Azure. And you want to be able to connect all that data to your users. Well, this is where Copilot Studio comes in, where you can create your own individual copilots. So if your users are thinking of, right, I want data regarding a support ticket, or I want data regarding a customer's sales order or something, and that data is not stored within your tenancy, it's stored in another platform, you can create different kind of questions, responses, and articulate the process that Copilot should follow to find that information. So that if you want a user to use Microsoft 365 chat within Teams, which is Copilot, and say, hey, I want to understand where the sales order is for this customer that was placed a few days ago, it will know, based on what you build in the background, to go and check in your CRM platform, to go into a certain area, to look for that customer name, to find the information that the user is asking for. And this very much opens up the possibilities of generative AI within your business to far extend beyond the Microsoft boundaries. But again, still inheriting all the security and compliance permissions that you've set up in your organization as well. All right. But I would encourage you to obviously buy Copilot first before you start looking at Copilot Studio, because obviously ensuring that you understand how Copilot works and engaging with your users, and this is very much part 2 of your journey of generative AI. Now, we'll quickly look at how Copilot in Word and PowerPoint and all the other applications kind of do things. So it's quite important to see here. When you're using Copilot within Word, as you can see here from this short GIF, you can use the / icon to ask it to draft a proposal based on 2 different documents. And you can ask it to pull information from one document and another document, and it will articulate it and describe it very quickly and summarize it into what you want. And you can also edit. I'll just play that video again in case you missed it. You can also edit and see, I'm happy with this response, or can you make it more concise? Can you give it to me in bullet points? So after it's generated a response, you can still change the response and keep it or edit or rewrite it as well. So it's quite important when you're looking at that. So it's quite useful and unique. When it comes to PowerPoint, as you can see here. Again, you can ask it to generate a presentation, again, based on another document. It could be a Word document, it could be an Excel document, and it can pull together all the information from that. But you can also ask it to pull together based on a theme. So if you've got a marketing deck that has a very specific type of company brand that you want to use, you can ask it to use that branding or that theme of that document to generate that format. And what I love about this as well is, say, for instance, you get to a slide and it's very wordy. There's like 6 or 7 bullet points, and you're thinking, this slide's a bit too wordy. We've all been there. You can say, hey, can you make this less wordy, and drop the notes and drop whatever you remove into the notes section. And anything that it feels that it can summarize in a more concise based scenario, it will drop the additional notes into the notes section for the speaker notes, which I think is fantastic because it allows you to know that it's not deleting stuff because it doesn't feel it's irrelevant. It's moving it into the notes section because it means that you don't have to show it. You can just talk about it, which I think is very intuitive of it. Then we come to Excel. Now, this is quite the exciting one because we all have an Excel guru in our organization. We're not always going to know the formulas and prompts in Excel. I, for one, I always lean on a couple of colleagues of mine. But what I love about Copilot in Excel is that you can describe what you're wanting to do with the data. You can ask it to, as you can see here, analyze the trend. You've got all this mountain of data and you want to see if there's a similarity or a correlation with this data that would help point out something that went wrong or something that went really, really well, and how can you articulate that data? So as you can see here, it can quickly summarize it. Now, what it doesn't show you in this GIF is that you can say, I want you to convert this into a table or a chart, and it will throw in the table or chart based on the information that it's collected. And it can start to generate kind of models for you within that data. And then from that, you can even say, can you give me some key trends or key topics to talk about this data that's interesting? And it will turn around and say, well, what was interesting was that the sales performance in this month was here, but it went to here because of potentially this outcome, because of what happened on these months or these sections of this product line. So it can help the users that are looking through this data be more productive by giving you a more concise information rather than having to troll through the data for hours on end. Or even if it's an invoice and you're trying to figure out, all this information is there anything that stands out that's relevant to this invoice or something that you should pay particular attention to? Maybe this is a scale of invoices on a monthly basis. Can you tell me if there's any difference between this invoice and the other invoice? And so it can articulate that as well, which is quite useful. Then you've got the Copilot icon in Outlook as well. This is particularly useful when you've got a thread of emails. Maybe you come back from a 2-week break in Tenerife or somewhere, and you come back to a mountain of emails and you're thinking, I don't have time for this on a Monday morning. You can say, hey, Copilot, can you summarize this email thread? Or, hey, Copilot, are there any urgent emails that I have to respond to where I've been added? Because a lot of these emails that we get when we're on leave are just CC'd in because someone wants to show you that they've done something, or CC'd in just for an FYI, just so that you're aware of something that's going to potentially impact something in the future. And so pulling through all the jargon that happens within our inbox is quite a great way of summarizing and catching up on much faster. I, for one, spend an entire morning after a couple of weeks annual leave on a Monday just going through all my emails to see what's important and what's not. And now that we've got Microsoft Teams in there, we have to do it on 2 different platforms, so it can be quite a bit of a challenge to catch up when we've just come back from leave. Then we've got Microsoft Teams Copilot. So again, when you're in a meeting, you can ask it to summarize what's happened so far if you've joined late. You can ask it to generate topics of conversation. So you can even ask Copilot to say, give me some questions I should be asking in this meeting. If the meeting has got context in terms of we're having this meeting because of X, Y, and Z, and it was in the email that was sent out, or there's an attachment on the email that was sent out for the meeting, you can ask Copilot to summarize what types of things should I be looking for or asking, and it will generate some ideas for you in that meeting. You can even ask it to, if it's recording the meeting, to summarize the meeting of certain tasks and actions. But if you've not joined a meeting and it's been recorded within your organization, you can ask it, Was I mentioned? Was this mentioned? And it will tell you at what point in the meeting was mentioned and who said what, which is fantastic as well. So it can really help you, you know, get through a lot of the information in a much faster stance. And then we've got Microsoft 365 Chat, which is the chat icon within Teams. So this is kind of where you can kind of bring together everything in kind of your own noteboard, so to speak. So you can say, hey, Copilot, how should I start my day? What do I need to do to prepare my day today? So rather than going into your inbox when you first turn on your PC in the morning, you can just go straight into 365 Chat and say, right, what do I got to do today? What's important for my day today? What kind of things should I pay attention to? And I could say, well, actually, Peter, you got a call at 9:30 with this client, and you got a webinar at 11, and there's over 150 plus attendees for this webinar. Then you've got another meeting at 12:30. You should probably do your lunch break from 12 to 12:30, and then another lunch break at 1:30 to 1:30. Oh, by the way, if you don't want this to happen again, should I block book some time in your diary for lunch break, for the rest of the week, sort of thing? Oh, here's an attachment that you need for this meeting that you've got coming in at 3 o'clock today. And it will help plan out your day ahead. You can even ask it to plan out your week. Which is quite interesting. And anything that happened over the weekend that you may have missed, it can say, well, actually, there's been a further update to this thread of emails or thread of chat messages in terms of what's happened within the organization to always keep you on top of everything. All right. Now, this is probably my favorite slide in the entire deck, and I was telling the guys at Tiva about this the other day there because it's really important that you know this. And this is if you were to take a picture of all the slides today, it would be this one specifically. When it comes to speaking to artificial intelligence, we always have those kind of moments where it's like, oh, it didn't do exactly what I asked it to. I, for one, I'll say the quiet word now in case it starts buzzing off, but the Alexa that we all have potentially, or the Google devices we have at home, and you ask it for something, and it will say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand that." It's very frustrating. And there's a lot of people out there that will start using generative AI, ChatGPT, and Copilot, and think, "Oh, I'm not going to have the best experience here," or I want to articulate something that I don't know how to type it out. This is your Bible. This is the best thing that you can get here. When you're speaking to generative AI, don't be short with it. Don't say, "Hey, can you do this for me?" and then and leave it and hit enter. Don't just ask it for something as if we were human. Okay, remember, it's not human. If we were to ask a colleague of mine, "Hey, can you give me the details of what happened on this, or can you perform this task for me?" Humans, because we have the history behind it and we know exactly what it is and how that person works or things like that, we will instinctively do that task. When it comes to AI, it still needs to learn how you do things and how you want them presented to you. All right. And it will get better as you use it. But for that first initial kind of 3 month to 6 month engagement with Copilot, try and have these 4 areas in mind. The goal of what you want from Copilot, where does it need to go to get the information? How does it need to flow that information, and how should it present that information? The best way that I can describe this is I gave an example yesterday. Is I was working at my desk last week, and I asked my 5-year-old son to go and get me my bottle of water from the living room. It took him about 3 or 4 minutes. Bear in mind, the living room is literally just down the corridor. 3 or 4 minutes to come back with my bottle of water. And he set it at the end of the table. He didn't set it next to me. And it really made me think I didn't give enough information in my request. All I asked was, to bring a bottle of water in from the kitchen, or sorry, from the living room, and I was in the kitchen. And it made me think if I'd spoken to AI, or if I'd spoken to him like this prompt does, which is, "Ben, can you go into the living room, please? And on the bookshelf, on the second shelf, can you grab me my bottle of water and bring it into the kitchen and set it next to me, please, because I'm thirsty?" He probably would have been back in 30 seconds because I've told him where the bottle of water was. I told him why I wanted a bottle of water, and I told him what to do with the bottle of water when he got it. So it's quite important that when you're speaking with AI, that you give it the goal, the context, the source, and the expectation of what you want from it. The longer the prompt, the better the response. All right. That's the key takeaway from today's call. Right. before we get into the last couple of slides of this, I just want to talk about some of the ideas of what you can do in terms of if you're in a specific type of role within your organization, the day in the life of. So this is the day in the life of a business owner. So this is Cassandra, fictitious, of course, and she starts her day at 7 o'clock in the morning. Definitely don't know anyone that does that. And she uses Copilot to monitor for any disagreements, with within a Teams chat. What are some good follow-up questions to, with a meeting that she's got coming up? And she has a call, and then she summarizes her email thread for the day and uses Copilot to create some replies to get through all of her emails within 20 minutes. All right. So in terms of, she's got all these emails to respond to, and she's like, "Hey, Copilot, can you give me a response? Can you respond to this and say this, this, and this?" And it'll generate a paragraph or something. Then she's got a few more minutes to catch up before her flight. She sent a few chats of instructions, and she asks Copilot to summarize what are people trying to say here. I've caught up on this chat thread, and I want a bit of a summary on it. Then we've got a long session of meetings. Sorry, I say Cassandra. It's Tanya on this one, not Cassandra. Apologies. Tanya gets a chance to have a look at her speech for tomorrow. She asks Copilot to add a section on bonus plan updates. So Copilot will then go and find the bonus plan Word document and summarize some things that she could talk about in her speech, which is quite interesting. And then we've got at 3 o'clock here, a critical production issue has occurred, and she needs to get up to speed quickly. And she asks it to summarize anything that mentions this particular word or phrase in the past 2 hours. So if there might be Teams chats, there might be emails, and things like that are going on. And then finally, when the issue is finally under control, she gets back to your speech and she asks it to give some suggestions of some jokes or something to open up the speech. So that's kind of a really nice way of how you can use Copilot as that type of person. Then we look at a sales lead. This is Cassandra. And we'll look at, obviously, in terms of summarizing the emails first thing in the morning, that's typically how most people with Copilot would start their day. And you can get it to draft an email response of getting prepared for a presentation. And then Cassandra at 9 o'clock receives the latest financial numbers, and she's got an important meeting to talk about that. So maybe she asks it to show the data insights. Is there any key trends that she should be talking about in her meeting that's in a couple of hours? Maybe she gets this document 10 minutes or 30 minutes before the meeting even occurs. There's not enough time to go through that information. So she asks Copilot to go through that. Then she's got some final touches to do. So she asks Copilot in a presentation to add a slide about some of the information that she wants. And then at 2 o'clock, she's got another Teams meeting, and she asks, what type of questions were asked during that meeting that maybe have not been answered or something like that. And then finally, she asks it to summarize a chat again, so she can quickly get through all the jargon that's happening through the day. And then finally, we've got the day in the life of an IT administrator. So maybe you're an IT administrator that's joined this webinar today, and you're wanting to use Copilot. So things like, asking it to summarize changes that have been made to a document. So if you've got loads of people working on a document and adding in their points of interest or something like that, or something regarding a deployment or something, you can ask it to summarize who changed what and what's been changed or what's been added or what's been missed out on. And then you've got a topic for the day. So in terms of, recapping all the help desk tips and things that have been said, if you've got Copilot as a plugin, you can say, what's the most prominent help desk ticket that's been raised today? And you can get it to summarize, well, most of them were from these group of users. Oh, actually, maybe you should have a look at the policy on that today, because maybe it's only affecting these users because this type of thing is only happening for this subset of users. And then you can create a checklist and draft up some bullet points. And then you've got a one-pager that you can respond back to for the help desk or something like that, to respond back to and things like that. So these are some of the different ways that you can engage with Copilot. Now, we've talked about what is Copilot. We've talked about how people typically use Copilot and how Copilot works as well. But the biggest thing that I'm sure you're all interested in is, how much money can Copilot save me? But also, how much time can it save me? Because time is money. And Microsoft did a study, obviously in the US, but we'll bring it into the UK for GBP type of thing. If the employee is on £35,000 a year salary, now that's before deductions and things like that, they have to save around 2 hours a month. All right, so this is this one here is on $70,000 a year salary at 2.5 hours, but for UK it's $35,000 a year. Sorry, £35,000 a year. You can save 2 hours a month with Copilot before it breaks even on the cost of Copilot. Now, Copilot is around about £24 per user per month. You have to pay for it annually up front. So it's just about £296 a year. That user just needs to save 2 hours a month. Now, out of everything I've shown you so far today, we can all be in agreement that all the great technologies of summarizing meetings, responding to a thread of emails, summarizing something within Excel, creating a presentation draft, we can almost guarantee that Copilot is going to save us more than 2 hours in a month. And this is where we can start to generate the ROI of Copilot. Now, when we're looking at the ROI of Copilot and how it can save us all this time and money, we're going to have to look at the impact of the investment that we have in it. So when we're looking at how is Copilot making its mark within my organization, you have a lot of tools at your disposal. Now, obviously, your IT provider, Tiva, in this case, can support you with the insights and things like that, and the advice and the deployment strategies. But if you're wanting to monitor individual groups of users or users within the organization that have Copilot to see how are they being productive, or how is Copilot saving them time, you can use the Viva Insights dashboard. Now, the Viva Insights dashboard will give a very high-level overview about how much time are people using Copilot and what applications are they using Copilot in the most, okay? But if you have a Viva license, which is an additional add-on, it's sub £4 a user. If you've got 10 people or more with a Viva license and a Copilot license, it can go even more granular in terms of how much time per day, what application are they using the most, what group of users are using it, and give you ideas on how other people in the organization would benefit if they had a Copilot license. That's powerful. So you can go to the Viva Insights dashboard and go, this week, all my Copilot users have saved X amount of time. If all these other users in this other department had a Copilot license, we could have saved X amount of time. It could also say, this group of people used Copilot in Excel the most. These are some of the ideas and the prompts that really help them save their time and investment for that day, which is quite interesting. But it can also tell you, the amount of meetings that have been summarized, the amount of emails that have been responded to, the amount of documents that it's edited as well. It can give you all that high-level information. So you can go back to the finance team, the MD, maybe you're the MD, and you can understand just what impact is Copilot having on my organization. Now, when it comes to, adopting Copilot and starting to look at Copilot, we want to look at the prerequisites, okay? So it's important to know that any 365 license as of today can be attached to Copilot. So if you've got Business Basic, Standard, Premium, Office E3, E5, F1, etc., you can attach a Copilot license to that user. Now, the license, as I said, it's around about £24.70 per user per month, but you have to pay for it upfront in full at £296.40 per year. So with the refresh of IT budgets, hopefully in the new tax year, hopefully you've got some investment to spend. But the minimum license purchase is one. But the recommendation to drive adoption is license one person per department, okay? Ideally 5 licenses or more to really drive the investment and the adoption of Copilot. And the reason why is because the companies that have started buying one license of Copilot since it became available in January this year have not got any adoption score or any kind of real effort to drive Copilot, because that one person could be the MD or the IT administrator, and they're not going to use Copilot how somebody in finance would use Copilot, or somebody in sales or support would use the same technology. And so it's critical that if you feel that AI has a place in your organization, that you license a single user per each department within your organization, because you may find at the end of your 1 year license commitment, Copilot within the finance team massively boosted productivity and saved them 5 hours a week per user or something like that. You might even find that it didn't really make an impact on the support team. Maybe they only saved an hour a month or 2 hours a month or something like that. Maybe because they weren't driving the usage of it enough, or they weren't engaging with it on as many documents as another department was. So it's important to license different users within different departments. And again, for the richest experience, the more data that you have in your organization, the more time you've been in 365, the better your responses will be for Copilot. But it's important to know that, as you drive your adoption, starting to add more users as you're going on. So if you think, right, I'm going to buy Copilot today for five people across my 5 departments today, in 6 months' time, add 5 more and add somebody else within that department. So those 2 users in a department can collate together to go, well, actually, I used Copilot today for this, and this was very helpful. Or I didn't use Copilot today, and this was, or this was a bad experience on a response I got from Copilot. And the users can start to work together to go, well, actually, I've been using Copilot a bit longer, and this is what helped me. But also Tiva can support you when it comes to driving that message as well, to ensure that you're getting the best response and the best adoption. So if you're having a problem or a bit of a niggle with something, and you're not quite sure if you're using it correctly, you can speak with Tiva and they can advise where possible. Okay. And then just to kind of recap on that Viva Insights piece, it's really important to know that when you're driving an adoption kind of message within the organization, you will obviously find people that will say, oh no, I'm not having the best experience with this, or maybe they're not using Copilot as much. You can still swap the licenses between people during your commitment, but also it will never tell you which user it is. Of course, just bear that in mind. It will always be trying to anonymize the data unless you're going into the audit, or exactly which users have Copilot. So just bear that in mind. But it's very important to know that the Viva Insights dashboard can help with the adoption of that. Okay. So, before I hand back over to Adam in just a second here, we just want to talk about the 4 steps to drive Copilot success. So, we want to ensure that you assess, have I got the right security controls and compliance controls in place? And can I start thinking about the types of users that I should license Copilot with? Or, should I license, 1 per department, 2 per department? Are there individuals who've already asked for AI in the environment as well? And start to think about, create a pilot group, create a Teams chat or a Teams channel or community, a champions group to say you are our AI initiative, and engage with them on a regular basis to ensure that they're sharing all the best practices of how they're using generative AI. And then you can start to expand into other departments and scale to your organization. Because as I said before, if you're just going to buy 1 license of Copilot and you're going to give 1 person access to it, they're going to use it differently to other people because everybody has a different job task in your organization. Now, one of the great things that you can do today, and Adam can touch on this after this slide, is you can have your environment assessed for Copilot. You can get a heavily detailed document like this today that will go through a compliance score of, are there certain things within your environment that don't make sense? Are there certain things within your security that should be turned on? Is there anything from the prerequisites of Copilot over here? You've got a traffic light system, which tells you that these are some high priority recommendations to have the best experience deploying Copilot. You've got over here in terms of things that you should be doing and license assignments that you should be looking at, and how you can come away with a report that says, before we buy Copilot, we need to address these things in our environment. So I'm going to hand back over to Adam here to go through some of these other programs and things.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. So in order to gain access to the Copilot assessment that Pete just spoke about, we will share the slides after this session. But on this slide here, there's actually a link to register interest. Now, the Copilot assessment itself is a costed exercise. However, if you register interest before the end of the month, then we can deploy that. We can execute that piece of work free of charge. There are also three other free of charge consultancy exercises available to those who attended today, which is the digital workspace assessment, zero trust security assessment, and the hybrid cloud assessment. Now, all three of these exercises are delivered in a 30-minute session, and they're all Q&A based. So we'll ask you a series of questions around how your end users are operating within your organization, have a look at some of the security considerations and configurations you've got set up at the moment, and where your data is located in terms of the hybrid cloud assessment. The information you give us, we'll take on. We'll put the metrics through effectively a calculator that we've designed, and it will spit recommendations out the back end. And we'll do this all within each 30-minute session. Now, those recommendations are for areas of improvement for you to consider further. There is a score-based system as well, which basically represents a percentage between your current position and good. To be honest with you, the score is secondary to the actual material recommendations. Now, to gain access to those particular pieces of work, I've left my contact details there in the form of my email, adam.gullis@tivo.co.uk. Again, we will be sharing these slides after the session. So yeah, feel free to contact me and I'll be happy to set up those sessions for you. Just in the interest of time, Pete, should we move on to the final slide? Because there are some questions in terms of Q&A.
I was going to say it is the final slide anyway. Next one. So here we go.
Okay, so we do have two other webinars in this series that Pete and I are going to be delivering. QR codes to access the webinars are there. You can access them on the Tiva website. They're posted on my LinkedIn. They're posted on Tiva LinkedIn. The next session is going to be really cool, I think. The next session we're going to be talking about how do we actually drive change and manage change for users in order to adopt Copilot within an organization. So we'll be joined by one of Pete's colleagues, Alex Parkinson, and he'll be going through basically what the frameworks of the approach will look like in order to ensure that end user adoption is optimized when adopting Copilot. And the third session will be an open forum. So it'll be an ask us anything session. We'll have I guess a live demonstration of Copilot. We'll be asking you to give us prompts and we putting those into the Copilot engine and basically seeing what the output is. So Pete, let's have a look at the Q&A. I think a few things came in.
Yeah.
I will. Yeah, if we just scroll back and have a look at. Okay, so Stuart, you posed the first question. You spoke about how data stays in your tenant. Has Microsoft changed its standpoint on taking certain data when you provide feedback from the prompt you give it and the response it provides?
Yeah, so that when you provide feedback on how a prompt isn't, yeah, Microsoft collects the data that you're giving it permission when you're providing it feedback. Okay, when it's learning about how to respond better, it's not taking any data. So when you click that feedback button, it collates what were you trying to reference, the document, that's everything, but it doesn't take the extract permission from that document. So in terms of if you go onto the Microsoft Learn website and go into Copilot, you can find some material on the security and data compliance of how Copilot gets its information. We can pick up offline after the webinar if you want a bit more detail on that. But no, it hasn't changed the response. It doesn't use the data that resides in your tenant to learn from.
Thank you, Pete. Dan, will the recording of this be available? Yes, so we will be publishing this on YouTube. The marketing team over the next day or so will be sharing with you an email which will include a link. I believe we're also providing access to a PDF version of the slides, so obviously you have access to the URLs, etc. if you wanted to follow up and obviously gain access to those funded assessments. Question from Russell: where is the index stored? What if you need it to regenerate it? Also, is there a size limit for this? So the first piece is, where is the index stored?
Well, it's stored with it. Well, it depends on your data residency for your tenant, I guess. But effectively, if you're a UK tenant, you're a UK company, and your company was created in the UK, it's most likely your data will reside in the UK. Okay. Microsoft will never tell you which data center it resides in, obviously. But that's typically where. When it comes to regenerating it, you don't need to ever regenerate it. The first time you put Copilot into your environment, it takes around 30 days to fully index and understand everything that is within your tenant. Okay, so the first couple of days, the responses might be a bit laggy or something like that, or you might have to prompt it a couple of times to get the response you want. But after 30 days, it's a wizard. But yeah, there's no size limit in terms of it. Obviously, the only size limit you've got is the size of your SharePoint allocation or your OneDrive allocation. But it will always look through your data on a regular basis, on a minute by minute, day by day, hour by hour basis to get the most relevant information. The one thing that, just to be completely transparent, the one thing that it cannot do is it cannot look through version history. So if somebody's changed a document, and couple of times ago, it will not be able to say, hey, can you tell me what happened in this document? It will tell you the changes people have made, okay? But if you've got a version history of three times prior, it will never generate and say, here's what was in this document 3 times ago, unless you physically go into the version history. But it will always tell you what the changes were to a document. So the last thing that was changed was this, but it will not tell you, oh, 3 times ago, Adam changed this. Okay.
Thanks, Pete. Okay, so Nick works at a college. He has A3 licenses. He wants to know if Copilot is included with the A3 licenses. Doesn't seem to have access to any of. I guess
Copilot is an add-on. You have to purchase Copilot, and unfortunately, for students and charities, there's no discount program for them. So, students, faculty, academic, customers and charity customers typically get massive discounts. When it comes to Copilot, there's no discounts, and you do have to purchase it separately. And as far as more, you cannot get any kind of student use benefits and things like that for it yet. Again, this is at the time of this recording, but yeah, you will have to purchase it separately if you want Copilot for your faculty members and students.
Okay, so Alex wants to know your thoughts on Windows Recall. What are your thoughts on Windows Recall on Copilots plus PCs launching soon?
So that's a very good one, Alex. So Windows Recall was announced a few weeks ago, and it received a massive amount of backlash from the security community because it effectively records everything that happens on the desktop at any given time, so that you can use Copilot and other forms of AI within like Windows, and things like that, to say, hey, I spoke about this and I can't find this thing. Can you find out where it was? Or I've forgotten my password. Can you tell me what it was, or something like that? Or I can't find this document. Can you tell me when I last had it open, or something like that? And Windows Recall will go back through every screenshot that it ever took and to figure out when did something happen and give you a response. Now, the security community was up in arms when Microsoft announced this, because they were just like, well, if somebody breaches your environment, they could just use Windows Recall to find out all the information of where certain things are, or maybe to find, you type in the word password and it'll show you every time you had to type a password in, and it'll show a screenshot of it. Which everyone was like, whoa, Microsoft, you need to slow down here. So Microsoft has delayed the launch of Recall because of that backlash that they got. But it's important to know that the security risk and the fears are genuine, and Microsoft has listened to that, obviously. So they have delayed the launch of Recall to make changes, of course. But the important thing to know is that you can disable Recall. You can disable it, okay? So working with your IT provider, when it does eventually become available, and maybe you're still a bit apprehensive about Windows Recall, you can disable it with a PowerShell script. Okay, so that you can disable it entirely. It's an all or nothing approach. You can't disable it for certain users. You can just disable it across the entire tenancy. But I guess keep on top of it from Microsoft to see what they say about it. But it has been delayed.
Okay, so Chris does lots of bid writing, and a lot of the questions he answers can be similar. He has a large library of bids he's split in the past on SharePoint, and he wants to know what the steps he needs to take to start using Copilot to speak with that bid library and get the similar answers back on questions he's answering. He has business premium licenses, doesn't have Copilot. No one currently uses Copilot. So I assume the answer to this one, once he's obviously gone through the readiness steps around security, is to buy a Copilot license.
Yeah. Yeah. So when it comes to articulating it to go into a certain area, obviously when you're using your prompts, you would always tell Copilot to look in that SharePoint site. And if there's anything specific that you would want to, you can obviously ask it to look in that area for anything specific. But if you're wanting to customize um, anything that you're asking it for, you would need Copilot Studio. But it'd be good to understand in a bit more detail, maybe offline, just how you know how you store that data, how you articulate that data, and what specifically you're asking from it. Because my understanding would be just based on what I can read here, you would just need a Copilot license. You wouldn't need to do. You would just need to articulate your prompt in the right way to get the information from your SharePoint library. Maybe you need to make sure that certain things are stored in a certain maybe file format to ensure that Copilot is finding things faster because it's in a certain format to save it in. But yeah, you can absolutely use it if you have a Copilot license. Yeah. I can see that another person's just added to just add this. I created a chatbot in Copilot Studio as a test that connects to the library mentioned. The difficulties faced are around Copilot not really providing much of use, and its document retrieval doesn't seem to be very accurate. This could be around the data structuring and naming conventions, absolutely. But it would be good to hear how granular Copilot actually looks into the documents when you ask it questions. It looks into the text. It looks granular into the text in the document. But again, if you've had Copilot less than a month, it will struggle for that first kind of period, as I said, because depending on how big your organization is or depending on how much data is in your organization, it has to look through everything to index it before it can correctly find everything that's relevant every time you prompt it. But we can absolutely pick up offline about this separately and with our Copilot adoption specialist as well.
Okay, so on the topic of Studio, Dan wants to know, does Copilot automatically have access to local network drives?
No, no.
Yeah, yeah. So Copilot Studio would be required for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you
Yeah,
go.
it only looks in the cloud. It only looks in OneDrive, SharePoint, and it doesn't look at any local network drives unless you give it access using Copilot. Yeah.
Okay. Donella wants to know, does the free version of Copilot take any data? How does Copilot learn compared to other AI tools? So I assume she's probably referring to like the Bing, maybe the Bing installation of Copilot in that instance,
Yeah,
right?
Bing Enterprise as it or
Yeah.
Bing, yeah, Copilot, yeah. So yeah, the free one will not look at data inside your tenancy. Obviously, you can use the web-based version of Word, PowerPoint, Excel on the document you're working on, but anything that it uses within the free version doesn't typically look at your internal company data unless you have it open in a web based version of it, or within Edge because you've got the Copilot icon in Edge or you attach it to your prompt box. But it will never take any of the data that you put into the text box or attach for Microsoft to learn on it. Again, that enterprise data security. It will never take any of the information for Microsoft to go and learn about. Whereas if you are using other chat models for AI, they will take everything you say to it to learn from to make it better. Whereas Microsoft has the enterprise grade data protection. Now, the important thing to note is you have to be signed in order for that to take effect. If you're not logged in with your company email address, it will be the consumer version and it will learn about everything. But if you're logged in with your Entra ID, which is the new name, if you didn't know, it used to be Active Directory, you have to be logged in for it to have that enterprise grade protection available. Okay, that's quite important. And you can set up custom policies to ensure that all your users are logged in on the fly. If you're unsure about making sure that people do it, you can have a policy that says that they're automatically logged in when they're using Bing and things like that.
Okay, so James has a requirement to summarize emails in shared inboxes. His understanding is that at the moment Copilot can only work with personal inboxes. Is that correct? Basically, how does he use Copilot to summarize emails in shared mailboxes?
That's a very good question. I've never had that before. I would have thought it would have been able to summarize things in a shared email box if that user has access to that shared email box. You'd have to obviously have, I would say you would have to double click on the email to have it open its own window and then click the Copilot icon to then ask it to summarize. It should be able to summarize it. If it doesn't, it's a new one on me. Yeah.
Yep.
We can pick up with that offline as well if needed.
Sure. I think that concludes the question. Oh no, sorry, Malcolm, I apologise. Malcolm wants to know what's the best way of preventing users accessing the Bing version that we just spoke about without the data protection?
What's the best way to prevent users from using the free version? All right,
The free
okay.
version in Bing, yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, you would have to set up a policy within Cloud App Security, I would say, to ensure that all users are logged into the Edge browser. I'm sure you can do it within other web browsers as well, but I know for a fact you can do it in Edge. As an example, whenever I turn on as soon as I open up Edge in my company browser, it automatically logged me into my work email account every single time. But yeah, you can turn on a policy within that. Again, you can speak with Tiva's solution architects team to see about that prompt. But yeah, you can absolutely do that.
Okie dokie. Right, we've run over slightly, but I think that's all the questions. So thank you everyone for who's still on the call. As I said, the team here will share all the information, recording of the webinar, the content, etc., the links that gives you access to contact me, the links that gives you access to the Copilot readiness assessment, and hopefully we'll see you on the next two webinars. So thank you very much.
Great. Thanks, everyone.